I'm Darren Hogue, President and Chief Executive Officer of Q96. I want to welcome everyone to our very first interview on QSN, or Q96 Network. Today it's my honor and privilege to be interviewing Tony Stephan. Tony is the formulator of the blockbuster product Q96. Tony, let me ask you a question. How did Q96 come about?
You know, Q96 came through, unfortunately, a very traumatic situation. I lost my first wife to a suicide, and she had been diagnosed with bipolar affective disorder 1. It's the most significant diagnosis that you can have in the affective disorders, and it was very, very sad what she went through. Extreme mood shifting, a lot of explosive type behavior. These were things that she didn't bring upon herself. It was part of the disorder. And sadly, her father took his life 16 years before she did. You know, Darren, at the time of her death, there was 2 of my children who struggled with the same thing. Both of them had also been diagnosed with bipolar affective disorder 1 with rapid cycling. And I was going to lose them. And it was so sad because I'd already buried my father-in-law. I love that man. And I buried the very best part of my life. And that was my sweetheart that I'd been married to for 23 years. And I remember those terrible feelings of helplessness, because there wasn't a thing that I could do to bring her back or to change what was happening with my children. I took my son to a number of psychiatrists. His name is Joseph Stephan. Joseph had been taking high levels of carbolith or lithium. It's a drug that people with bipolar affective disorder use. And it wasn't having a real positive effect on him. He complained constantly about the fogginess in his mind. He gained a lot of weight. It kind of took the edge off a little bit. But with it, it took his personality and it took his life. He just didn't feel like he was existing at all. My daughter, Autumn, 23 years of age, married, had a little boy. She was on 5 different medications: Haldol, Rivotril, Epival, Ativan, and Cogentin. And sadly, there wasn't anything that the medical practitioners could do to change or help her through what she was going through. She went through a constant volley of medication changes, in and out of the psych ward. Her husband was getting to the point where their marriage was almost ready to split, because when you have that kind of a situation in a home, it affects the whole ambiance. Everyone becomes ill. The amount of stress and pressure that are put on to families because of these types of disorders is terrifying. And I realized after taking my son to a number of psychiatrists that there wasn't going to be an answer. I married about 8 months, remarried about 8 months after my wife's death, and I married her best friend, and she's just been a blessing to our life. And when she came into the home, it was so difficult. And I don't mean to, this isn't a criticism, but it was like living in an asylum. And all of my children were afraid of Joseph. I mean, here's 240 pounds of fury. And my wife said, Tony, you know, we've taken him to a number of doctors and nothing's happening. There's no hope for him to get better. Let's take him to the University of Calgary, the Foothills Hospital Extension. I've heard of this doctor, this psychiatrist, that's quite well renowned. And we'll travel up with Joseph and I'll see if I can get an appointment. So she did. It took us about 3 months. And of course, in that 3-month period, it was just havoc. I'm having to go to school about every second, third day and take him out because of the fights. And he would have meltdowns emotionally. We had to be so careful how we would wake him up because he'd be in this terrible sullen depression. Explosive. Absolutely explosive. And by afternoon, he was in a raging mania, making absolutely inappropriate decisions. So his life was in a terrible state. And so she arranged for this appointment, and we drove up. It's about a 3-hour trip. And I remember going in, and after about an hour in the waiting room, we were invited to come into the doctor's office. And she was very kind, just a wonderful lady and compassionate. And I went on to tell her what we were going through, Darren. And she said, please, Mr. Stephan, spare me the details. Because you see, I've dealt with thousands and thousands of people.
So she knew exactly what you were saying, huh?
Oh, absolutely. She'd already seen it. And so many families were living the same nightmare that we were living. Some of them had already even lost family members to suicide, just like we did. And I remember saying to her, Doctor, there's got to be a better answer. My daughter's on 5 medications. This young man's on lithium. He'll never have a life. He'll never have a child that he can hold to call his own. A sweetheart by his side. A vocation, an education, a career, or whatever. You see, that would never ever happen because he was so dysfunctional. And I was telling her this, and I said, so with that, there's got to be some better research. There's got to be an answer because there's tens and tens of millions of dollars that are going into research, and you've got facilities all over the globe. There must be a better answer. And she said, no. No, there isn't. Mr. Stephan, you've got the best. These medications, while they're not perfect, we're going to try and find something that'll sedate him. And I guess I pushed the envelope a little bit too hard. And she said, Mrs. Stephan, would you take Joseph and go out in the waiting room and close the door? I need to talk to your husband. And you know, when that door closed, it was like a shotgun going off in my face. Mr. Stephan, you need a wake-up call. You need to understand what you see is what you've got. You're not going to change this equation. It's not going to get better. And she had this large manual. I now know what it is. It's the DSM-4, the Diagnostic Statistical Manual. And, you know, she opened it up and she said, do you see what it says here? It says that this disorder becomes more chronic with age. That's what you have to look for.
So it's just going to get worse.
Yeah. As he gets older, he's going to become less functional. He's not going to get better. And Mr. Stephan, it says that here that it's a recurrent disorder. That means it's incurable. There is no cure for it. And you know, Mr. Stephan, sadly, I need to tell you this, that there's a very, very high chance that he's going to suicide, just like his mother did and his grandfather. Boy, howdy, if I have ever experienced a loss of hope, it was right there and then. And she shattered any hope that I had that somehow these medications would bring him around, that somehow he would become like the little 5-year-old boy that he used to be, where he was so compassionate and loving and sharing. Because you see, when he hit puberty, he absolutely lost it. He didn't line up to sign up for this. He never asked for this. Nobody would. It's just what came upon him. And there are so many people who suffered the same experience every day.